It is 10 a.m. Good morning from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. The NFL Draft begins tomorrow night in Green Bay. The Titans held their official pre-draft press conference on Tuesday with Chad Brinker, Mike Borgonzi, and Brian Callahan, who made it clear that the Titans will not be moving off the number one pick. Borgonzi was asked at what point in the process the team decided that a trade would not be in the cards.
You know, it's such a long process here, and we wanted to go through the whole thing. I don't know if there was a certain point along the process, but we were listening the whole time. And then, you know, as we got towards the end of the process, you know, we decided as an organization we're going to stay.
NBA playoffs, the Memphis Grizzlies are down 2-0 in the first-round series against the Thunder, losing 118-99 on Tuesday. The series moves to Memphis tomorrow. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Felt good to be back at the Titans facility. Means we're just one sleep away from the NFL Draft. Good morning. Welcome in. We got Lucas. We got Robert. We got you. Until 1 o'clock, 615-737-1045 is the number. Yes, we had a press conference that I know Blaine and Zach carried almost at its full length. It was, I don't know, we were in there for about 38, 40 minutes around with Chad Brinker, president of football operations, Mike Borgonzi, first-year general manager on the job, and head coach Brian Callahan. And there were a great many things that were discussed, not the least of which was a clip that you just heard about Mike Borgonzi saying that, we're good. We're going to pick at one. We've decided. They wouldn't give up the goods, even though they were asked a bunch of questions about Cam Ward because they know they're going to take Cam Ward, and we know they're going to take Cam Ward, but, you know, hush, hush, until such time as it's actually set in stone.
That's fine. Let him have his moment.
Who? Cam Ward or Borgonzi?
Cam Ward.
Okay, very good. Well, Cam Ward will have his moment tomorrow night with the first pick in the first round. How will the NFL find a way to go to commercial break on the Titans pick if it's the number one overall pick?
Can't do it this time.
I don't think so. They'll try their damnedest, but I don't think they'll be able to get away with it.
They don't do that in the first round anyway.
They absolutely do.
No, they don't. When's the last time we missed a first-round pick of the Titans because of a commercial? I'm pretty sure every pick.
Traylon, if I remember correctly.
Is that? I mean, Robert is the most draft guru aficionado on here. Does that happen? I feel like the NFL Draft first round, every pick we get to see live.
Yeah, that's kind of what I lean to. But with the Traylon one, there may have been an instance because there was a trade.
Kind of things going on.
There was a trade, so maybe they took a break during that. But like in the first round, I feel like Goodell comes up to the stage. He announces the pick for every player.
Yeah, the trade probably happened during the commercial, but let's not act like they just.
Lucas, I'm telling you,
we hear Roger Goodell announce every first-round pick.
Oh yeah, hear him, but do you get the full experience? Because then immediately it cuts to commercial break when the Tennessee Titans have concluded their situation.
Either way,
Titans fans will get the full freight tomorrow night. At 7 p.m. is when the draft coverage starts. What time's Titans radio coverage start? 6?
6 o'clock.
Immediately following 3HL.
Presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans. Are you surprised that they were as steadfast as they were in we are not open for business with the number one pick?
Well, yeah, at this point, I mean.
I don't know. I asked you yesterday, do you think they'll say they're open for business? You said, oh, yeah, they definitely will.
Well, they said they were open for business, but not for the number one overall pick because they have 7 other picks that they could theoretically do business around. But I did expect maybe not quite as, I think, how was the question phrased to Borgonzi? Would you tell other teams that would be interested in trading up, don't bother at this point in time? And he said, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's about as close as you're going to get in the meantime, even though we all know the obvious, and that's all well and good. But with everything else that was covered yesterday, there was some interesting stuff from Brian Callahan that we'll get to. There is also some interesting stuff from Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker that we will get to regarding the stability around a rookie quarterback, the overcoaching, but not undercoaching of a rookie quarterback skill set, all manner of things covered. Outside of quarterback conversation, and there was a great deal of quarterback conversation, they also talked about not drafting based on need. And that is something that is going to come up a couple of different times over the course of the weekend. I don't know. You tell me, the two of you. If you spend as much time hearing the same, I don't know, we'll call it 5 to 6 names for your team, and you get some level of expectation that your team is going to take one of those 5 to 6 players, except there's 300, how many draftable players this year? 320-something that were invited to the Combine. So there's a lot more players that could end up being drafted to your team. If you don't get a name that you've spent the last 3 to 4 months familiarizing yourself with, are you disappointed? Or are you just like, okay, I'll figure it out?
I think it's less about name and more about position. I think fans get very hung up on, we better leave this draft with
X, Y, and Z.
Wide receiver, with an edge rusher. And we've seen that here with the wide receiver position especially, given that outside of Traylon Burks and A.J. Brown, they don't draft them in the top 100. And they only have one pick that's not the number one pick in the top 100 as of right now to potentially draft a receiver. So I can already tell you, if the Titans trade back or don't draft a receiver at 35, I think that is going to be the first thing to provide outrage from the Titans fan base. We know what's going to happen with the number one pick. Where's the first point where Titans fans will just be beside themselves? And for me, that is if a wide receiver's name is not called with the 35th pick.
What if it's called with the 38th pick because they've traded back? People are going to be butthurt about that. Listen, and it's a good point by you, because I remember, so 2022, there was a great many things that happened in the 2022 draft, including the A.J. Brown trade. But they drafted Roger McCreary in the second round. Titans fans throw their hands up in the air and be like, what the hell are we doing drafting a second-round corner with these little T-Rex arms? What's he going to do? Because at the time, in 2022, they would have had Caleb Farley, a first-round pick. They would have had, who else was playing corner at the time for the 2022 Tennessee Titans?
I mean, Fulton.
Christian Fulton was still here, a former second-round pick. Elijah Molden, still here, a third rounder. Pick. He was, pick number 100? If I remember correctly. So they threw their hands up in the air. They were all manner of pissed about why the hell are we drafting a corner in the second round. Turned out that corner is the only top 100 player, arguably the only player out of those last 3 J-Rob drafts that ended up being worth a damn.
What's the draft pick on the day of, with no results in hand? We can't say Caleb Farley. What's the draft pick that sparked the most outrage in this most recent era of Titans football among the fan base?
Whoa.
Like the Burks thing is a unique thing because that was more because of the trade.
But even then, there are so many people that do that retroactively, get pissed about it retroactively, when in real time, I would argue that there was probably 35 to 40% of the fan base justifying the trade.
Now, that's not how I remember it, because I remember the next day being nuclear on the radio show.
Because I was pissed, it's stupid. The people that are going to call us are pissed.
Yeah.
Like people who are okay with trading AJ. I mean, we got some, though. Oh, he's a diva. Oh, he wants too much money. Oh, he's not available. These kind of things. Like, we got those calls. It was just, there were more calls about people upset about it, understandably so. But it's like anything. It's like Yelp reviews. How many people leave positive Yelp reviews as opposed to if you have a bad experience at a restaurant and you just want to just take somebody out afterwards?
I always leave great Yelp reviews.
I do. I leave Yelp. I even upload the pictures that I take because phone eats first.
So who would it be? Would it be Levis?
Outrage?
Like immediate outrage, too, not retroactively looking back.
Exactly.
There was disconcerting, there was a discontentment, but I don't think it was even outrage because, again, it was a quarterback. And you needed some kind of Tannehill plan. And there are plenty of Vols fans in the audience who said, that guy's never going to be good. I've seen him play. I've seen his entire collegiate career, at least the 2 years that he was at Kentucky. He's not good. Don't do that. but it was more split than just outright outrage. I'm trying to, so in the last, this will be my 9th draft. I'm having a really hard time coming up with a pick that outraged people, because most people are fine during the draft. Like, you're just happy to get new players on your roster.
Yeah, hope reigns eternal.
You know, like this is the season of hope. Nobody loses really until you find out that Caleb Farley's body is going to betray him, and Isaiah Wilson's got a drunk driving problem, and Traylon Burks, God love him, is asthmatic and overweight and all these kind of things in his rookie mini camp into training camp. Like, the outrage comes in the months after, as opposed to on draft night.
Dylan says 80 to 90% of our fans knew what was coming with Levis. That was definite outrage.
It's way too high.
Evan says the A.J. Brown trade outraged me. It's got to be either Burks. Nothing prompted a bigger reaction than Burks.
It wasn't Burks, though. It was that they traded A.J.
And then I'd say Levis right under that.
Yes, for sure. But I think that there were people who made it make sense in their head, because if they'd have drafted Levis in the first, okay, then maybe there's outrage.
Well, there's always a portion that make it make sense in their head. It's hard to have a draft pick where the fan base is unanimously, what are you doing? Like, that's what the draft is, right? It is hope. You picture the best case scenario. When you draft this player, that's what runs through the mind of a fan, is what the player can be, not what the player isn't going to be.
And I think that's not a bad outlook to have. Like, generally, in most cases, I would argue that the people making these picks know more than we do. So if your initial reaction is to be like, oh, why the hell didn't they draft so-and-so? He was right there. You don't get to look at their board. You don't get, so, like, naturally, I think you should be a little more positive leaning with your draft picks. Now, in certain situations, like, who was the wide receiver they took in the 4th over Amon-Ra? Like Drake or what was his name?
Oh, Dez Fitzpatrick.
Dez Fitzpatrick. Like,
Dez Fitzpatrick was an outrage pick.
Like, I can understand being upset about that.
Not taking Trey Smith was an outrage pick. Can we do players that they didn't take? Because there's far many more of those.
But there are plenty of instances where fans have egg on their face, too, because famously the Buffalo Bills draft Josh Allen, and he gets booed. There's videos all over of Bills fans slamming their headphones on the ground because they drafted Josh Allen. Why the hell would we want this quarterback from Wyoming? And now they're all doing backflips. So, like Coach Mack says, I would just take everything. It's never as good as you think it is. It's never as bad as you think it is. You're allowed to be excited, but there's no reason to poo-poo things before we see them play out.
Because, I mean, Lucas, if you'll remember, Bert, I don't know if you were still on the show at that point in time.
Probably got fired at that point.
Well, yeah, and that speaks to the level of ineptitude that we have around here, that we just can't fire people permanently.
I'm a cockroach.
Yeah, in more ways than one. Because I remember texting people that were literally in the room when they drafted Levis, and the justification made sense for the position. The only thing that didn't make sense was the name. Like, the name Will Levis versus the position and the positional value and the value that they thought they were getting by not taking him in the first round. And, okay, it's a premium position. You gave up a 3rd-round pick, and you took him in the 2nd round. But if it hits, nobody's going to care that you gave up that 3rd-rounder because you've got a quarterback, except it's Will Levis, and except you have no idea that he's going to be completely fine in the meeting rooms, and he's going to be completely fine at practice. Maybe he leaves some things to be desired on a day-to-day from training camp until he gets out on the field and, professionally pees down his leg.
Oh, wow. Doing the thing that he did for almost the entirety of his college career. It's very shocking that turned out the way that it did.
Sure, but you understand my point about the premium value of a quarterback.
Yes.
We've talked about it a million times, and they were justifying it in the draft room by saying, wasn't a premium price that we paid for a premium position? We'll take that.
I don't want to hear about positional value if the player isn't good. And I'm biased on it because that was my stance on Levis. Because that got thrown at me. Yeah, but you got the quarterback. It's the value.
You don't
What
get
value
to do
is it
that
if the player
you wrote
sucks?
the quarterback an apology poem. All of your words mean nothing, even though you didn't even write those words. You had ChatGPT do it for you.
Well, they came from the heart at the time.
You wrote him an apology poem, okay? So you are the biggest snake in the grass regarding this particular topic that could be possibly found anywhere on this radio station.
You only wanted him here because you knew people would
That's right,
bleat
but I
their
was
pants
honest
at the
about
pick.
it. I was honest about it. You, however, you're a turncoat.
I did snip snap on Levis.
615, I almost said Snicks15.
Snip, snap, 1-5.
Got caught up in the air for a moment. Speaking of getting caught up, I got caught up, as we all did, reading this Chris Lowe piece on ESPN.com. It's substantive, but there is a ton of information that has not been previously disclosed about how things came to a crashing halt between Nico Iamaleava and the University of Tennessee. We will dissect Chris Lowe's piece coming up next.
Hey guys, it's Lucas to tell you about the coolest new spot in Music City. It's Fog Street Lawn Club. It's Nashville Premier's soccer pub. It's your go-to spot to watch Nashville SC games, and it's open early for Premier League action, even for those 6 a.m. kickoffs. But really, it's perfect for any sport. And B, Fog Street Lawn Club, you will never get bored. You can spend the whole day at this place. Check out the rooftop. It's the most picture-perfect view of downtown Nashville you're going to find on a rooftop, I promise. Go to find out for yourself. You can play British-style lawn bowling, cornhole on the rooftop for free, or head next door. Challenge your friends to some axe throwing at Bad Axe. Located near the Gulch in the upcoming Pie Town neighborhood, right there next to Third Man Records, Fog Street Lawn Club gives you the experience of downtown Nashville, but you can do that with avoiding all the hustle and bustle and the craziness of Broadway. Family friendly, great for all sports fans. You can even host special events on that beautiful rooftop. By the way, the concert series coming this summer to Fog Street Lawn Club, going to be a great time. Not to mention their amazing menu of British pub-style food and large drink selection. Check them out. Fog Street Lawn Club, located on Fog Street.
Welcome back to the show. Fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. Best hot chicken in the world. 615-737-1045. How you jump in. We've talked a lot about the saga at Tennessee that now includes UCLA, where the rare quarterback exchange, though it's probably not going to be as rare until we get some more guardrails on this whole situation. And now you've got Aguilar, the former UCLA quarterback, coming over to Tennessee, and Nico Iamaleava going to UCLA in what's not quite a trade, but might as well be a trade, and some big questions that have been left lingering out there for the better part of, I don't know, we're coming up on 2 weeks since this whole thing started to devolve. So lucky for us and lucky for the college football consuming world, Chris Lowe exists. And Chris Lowe is one of the most well-sourced and credible reporters in the world of college football, specifically the SEC and most specifically the University of Tennessee. And he has a piece up at ESPN.com with Max Olson and Adam Rittenberg, who has been on the show. We should probably have Adam Rittenberg back at some point in time if we would be so inclined, maybe after the draft, detailing the lead-up to Nico Iamaleava and Tennessee's fallout, which started 4 months prior, going back all the way to December, where the initial part of the Nico Iamaleava camp reaching out to Tennessee and specifically to the NIL arm of Tennessee, Spire Sports, seeking a pay increase for Nico heading into this coming season of about a $4 million range. It's a huge, huge article. And there are so many different details in here, not just about the University of Tennessee and UCLA, but also about different programs who have experienced the exact same thing, it's just not nearly as public. So for us who have covered this thing at great length, and for Lucas specifically, who's the only Vol alumni on the show and a diehard Tennessee fan, what was the thing in Chris Lowe's piece that caught your attention most? Because it's tough to pick from just one.
Man, yeah, where to begin? I mean, quickly, if we're to go chronologically, he starts off by saying that on December 28th, hours before the winter portal closed, Nico's reps, including his dad, of course, reached out to Spire Sports, the collective, wanting to get up to that $4 million mark, of course, getting closer to the Carson Beck and the Darian Mensah numbers. And Chris reports this as though it's fact, and then he adds afterwards that sources close to the QB deny that they were seeking $4 million, which we know. What we didn't know is that Nico was not returning phone calls from coaches at this point, that sources close to the situation said he needed a, quote, mental break after the loss to Ohio State, and that he did seriously consider entering his name into the portal in the winter window. And that started really a long chain of a tumultuous offseason between the two. Going down to this part here, before spring practices started in March, school officials were alerted by Oregon staff, which we know, that Nico's camp had contacted them. So they were putting out feelers everywhere. Now, others in Nico's camp report that, or sources tell Chris Lowe that they expected Heupel to shore up the offensive line and reload at receiver. One source said the head coach made, quote, false promises about those efforts. Heupel obviously has declined to comment about those things. They did address the offensive line, to me, about as much as they could in the portal. You could easily say more could have been done at receiver. They only added Amari Jefferson, who didn't really play at Alabama, 4-star prospect coming out, a year at Bama, and then he comes to Tennessee, and I expect them to try to add a receiver before the spring portal closes in a couple of days. Talks continued between the two sides. This has been reported, I don't think we've brought it up, that there had been opportunities in place for Nico to make, quote, well into six figures in additional NIL earnings if he agreed to certain appearances and requests, but he declined to do so. I'll add parenthetically, I know a ton of people that still work for VFL Films, that used to work for VFL Films, that have told me, Nico, it was very difficult to get him to show up for stuff, whether it was interviews, autograph sessions. He was not a guy who wanted any part of that.
Yeah, but and I would also add to that, that's most athletes.
Sure.
Like in my experience dealing with professional athletes, it is very difficult to, and they have full schedules, certainly at the pro level. It's very difficult to get them to do things outside of the structure of their day-to-day.
Yeah, but there were scheduled appearances for Nico, whether it was for content or for fan stuff, that he would just no-show. And as Chris Lowe says, he left a lot of money on the table for not agreeing to that stuff. So spring practice reaches its final week.
Well, this is the thing that's most interesting to me.
Go ahead.
That as they are concluding spring practices and as Nico Iamaleava is walking off the field, he's telling at least one teammate, quote, "I'm getting in the portal if you need to handle your business." He's out here publicly talking about it. And this is where the culpability lands on the player as much as it does the people around him. What kind of problem could you foresee that causing when the starting quarterback of a college football playoff contender last year is walking off the field at practice telling at least one dude, probably more than that, at least, but we have one for sure, yeah, I'm out. If you guys want to bounce, do your thing. But just so you know, I guess that's his version of trying to be a good teammate. I don't know really how to... I don't know how I feel about that, because on one side, I am for players being able to maximize value and being able to maximize their situation. And if you feel like the quarterback situation is going to go bad, then I got no problem with you bouncing, because that's what the rules allow for currently. On the other, that's not a very good way to maintain the consistency and the buy-in of a program if you have your starting quarterback, the most important player on the team, going around and be like, yeah, boys, if you want to bounce, I'm out too.
And then what's interesting is one of those teammates went to Heupel, alerting him, hey, Nico said this off the practice field. Heupel met with Nico to make sure everything was okay. And Nico assured his coach that everything was good, and it's all a bunch of rumors. Mm-hmm. Quote, all a bunch of rumors. So Nico's reps go to Tennessee at the end of December, say, A, we want more money. We want $4 million, which they are denying. And B, we want more help. We want offensive linemen. We want wide receivers. They address the offensive line, apparently not as much as Nico's camp would have liked. They don't address receiver as much. Obviously, they don't meet that number of $4 million, and it just kind of lingers over spring practice. And Chris Lowe reports there was kind of a general uneasiness about the situation for the people involved that kind of knew all the details. So the On3 report comes out. We know what happened. Pete Nakos gets called the B word by Nico's dad, and it's being called a false narrative. They're saying this is totally untrue, that we're very happy with the deal we have at Tennessee. Nico's phone is blowing up Thursday with calls and texts while he's eating dinner at offensive coordinator Joey Halsley's house with the other quarterbacks. But later that night, this is straight from the article, sources close to Iamaleava say he reached his breaking point. He couldn't understand why the reports were coming out, where they came from, or who he could trust going forward, and he felt pressured to make a decision about his future. He was ready to leave, but his father encouraged him to sleep on the decision. This is where the narrative about Nico's father is getting all twisted up and almost reversed by Chris Lowe, because he says the next morning, Nico did not show up for Friday's practice or meetings, didn't alert anyone in the program. Nick Iamaleava urged his son to go in and meet face-to-face with Heupel and his coaches to work things out. But Iamaleava felt betrayed, sources said, and did not speak with Heupel on Friday. Several people within the Vols program tried to reach out to the quarterback to no avail. Quote, he's hurt and he's disappointed, said a source close to Nico on that Friday morning, and they're making him look like the villain and the scapegoat. That's the biggest twist in this thing from Chris Lowe, that Nico's father was like, you got to go back in there. You got to figure this out, patch things up. And Nico said, I'm done. I'm out. He felt betrayed by the report getting leaked. Who knows where that report came from? Obviously, the report was more true than untrue.
One could guess.
But, man, that was quite the twist in the Chris Lowe reporting, that Nick Iamaleava, which we assumed was the one to tell Nico, you're not showing up to practice, was urging Nico to go back into the facility, and Nico was the one who didn't want to.
Well, it's a lot to digest because there's some additional information in here about his younger brother, Madden, who is now going to UCLA. We haven't talked about that yet as a part of a package deal. You've got Deshaun Foster, the head coach of UCLA, talking about how good the buzz is for them. Just to have people talking about UCLA football, that's all well and good until you have actual expectations on your program and you do what you did last year, which is 5-7. So I guess, again, how do you feel about finding out that Nico is the one who ultimately put the final nail in the coffin by opting to not show up to that practice of his own volition as opposed to being advised to hold in? Because that was the thing that set it all off.
Yeah.
Like publicly set it all off. That got NFL media talking about this because it's the first college football hold-in ever, when in reality it wasn't a hold-in. He was done at that point in time. He, according to the reporting of Chris Lowe, felt betrayed by the situation. And by the way, I know that Vols fans are going to be quick to continue to villainize him, and you can do that as you like, and you're entitled to your own opinion. But I don't blame him one bit for feeling hurt if he didn't know where the information was coming from and if it was continuing to be leaked. And you have Pete Nakos out there reporting it. And by all accounts, he's not a problem child. Like, he's not a diva. He's a mild-mannered West Coast, what's the story describe him as? California cool type of kid. Like, he goes about his business. There's Tennessee sources on the record in Chris Lowe's piece talking about the fact that, yeah, he worked hard. He showed up. He was a good teammate. All these different things. It just became super problematic and then super public at the end based on not one decision, but a series of decisions that led to the player, who is entitled to make his own choices here, making the choice that ultimately saw he and Tennessee part ways.
To sum it up, what it sounds like is Nico's team went out, tried to get him a new deal. That leaks out there. Nico is confused as to how that got out. He feels betrayed for that getting out. And who knows how that gets out? Agents talk to each other. People within collectives talk to each other, talk to reporters. There's a million different ways that could have gotten out. Mm-hmm. Nico feels betrayed, thinking that's got to be Tennessee trying to work against him in this.
Which is a fair conclusion to draw.
Sure, especially for a 20-year-old.
And not without some level of truth to it, right? Because if you're the university and you're the athletic department and you're the football program, you want to come out of this as cleanly as humanly possible. You don't want to be, you're going to lose in some form or fashion, but you don't want to be painted as the primary loser in all of this.
I put myself in the shoes of a 20-year-old and understand why he would feel that way. And then we also zoom out and look at it from a third-party perspective like we are. Nico's camp, I don't think, was very subtle in these dealings. Again, they are not professionals. Nobody here is a certified agent that's dealing with Spire Sports in Tennessee in this situation. So I believe that it got out there. And I don't know how exactly it got out there, but for Nico, it was Tennessee betraying him, for lack of a better term. And he said, I'm done. I'm out. We talked about the idea that maybe a general manager could have prevented this. There's no way of ever knowing if that's the case. But to have somebody whose entire job is to make sure situations like this don't fester, it is something that you look at and say, well, maybe this could have been dealt with. Because it sounds like, and again, Nico's